Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast, where I am a woman on a mission, apparently to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you, functioning for you. Well, this video is for Vanessa, from Vanessa. I got so much interesting inspiration from watching her video, which she did on her process of creating additional foundation cards for the subjects in her area. She's following the minimalist plan, and she's working with the most recent step that we did, step 6, where we talked about creating subjects to go under our core area based on gathering more books in our reading plan and taking a look at how the reading plan laid out in front of ourselves. Now, Vanessa is reading for a very specific purpose for the book that she's writing, and I will include the link to her video in the show notes, so go look and check. And her foundation cards for her subjects are shaping up very differently than the way mine did. And it's quite fascinating, and I think you might enjoy it because it's a good way to see the range of different shapes of people's Zettelkasten. That's why I say it will ultimately be the Zettelkasten of your dreams, because each one of us is unique. And so the choices that we make are going to shape our Zettelkastens differently, and no two people's Zettelkastens would be exactly alike. They wouldn't be useful if they were. They have to be specific to you. Now, this is not in the minimalist series because we're taking a step back and we're looking at it from sort of a philosophical angle, which I'm not doing for my minimalist people. I want my minimalist people to just do the assignment and then look and see what they've got. What they've got when they're done is they will have a working Zettelkasten. And then they can say, oh, so that's what a Zettelkasten looks like. I'll tell you an interesting family anecdote. Back in the 1960s, RCA created the world's first random access computer, which had random access storage. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the pictures of the olden days of computers with the tape drives and the big tape. Well, that meant back in those days you have to go through a piece of tape to get to the spot that you wanted, and there's no way to go straight to it. Well, everybody knows now that you just go straight to the memory. Well, most people think of like a disk if you had to do that for an external storage mechanism. Now, or more often now even, it's a thumb drive. But the very first was the RCA race computer, and it was actually something that looked like a big oversized magnetic file card. And the machine would pull one of those at random out of the rack, pull it into the read area, and then read a specific spot on that card. Well, when it came time to build the first machine, my father was invited to be on the team to actually construct it. He wasn't one of the engineers on the project, but he was a lead foreman in electronics assembly for RCA. So he worked with the gentleman who actually designed the machine and actually did the soldering and the wire wrapping and whatever, assembled all the components so that they had the box sitting in front of them. And when it was all done, my dad said, oh, so that's what a computer looks like. That's the experience that I'm trying to create for my minimalist people with a Zettelkasten. When they get all done, they'll look at it and say, oh, so that's a Zettelkasten. Now I get it. So because of that, it's a structured, few choices, straight line approach to get a working Zettelkasten. But today's video is kind of meta to that because the foundation card concept I introduced in the Minimalist series, and now Vanessa is doing her homework from that series, and she's absolutely brilliant. She's an amazing person, and I'm just thrilled to have come to know her. And she made a video. Has made a short series of videos of her experience doing her homework assignments. So this video comes from her work on the foundation cards. And she asked some questions in the video, which I'm going to answer, but I'm also going to share with you how the structure of her foundation cards differed so much from the structure that mine fell into, just so that you have a way of seeing how different the Zettelkastens can be. So this is going to be a little bit philosophical, and I hope you will enjoy this look, and you probably will want to at some point take a look at Vanessa so that you can really appreciate this woman's brilliance, if nothing else. So come on over to the down-facing camera and we'll talk a little bit about where structure comes from when you're using foundation cards in a Zettelkasten. See you over there. In the Minimalist series, I had asked my students, those who are following the course, to come up with 3 books in 3 as far separate areas as they had ahead of them in their coming up reading plan. And then after they chose those 3 books, I asked them to think about and to ponder what was the core area of that book. How, if they went way to the largest whole that that book was a part of, what would that core area be? And then I had them create a foundation card based on that core area, which was basically a card where they stated why they wanted to learn more about that area, how that made them feel, the source, and a tagline, because it was a very special main card, so it has to have all these 4 elements. Then, after they did that for 3 books, I asked them to start pulling out some books, additional books that were in their reading plan, and take a look at if there were some subjects that the books were starting to divide themselves into. For example, one of my core areas was business, and it turned out one of the subject areas under business was bookkeeping and accounting. That was represented by 2 books in my reading plan. So I ended up with a very structured, hierarchical approach. Kind of looks like this. The core area was business, the subject area was bookkeeping and accounting, and I had 2 books that came under that subject area. That same situation occurred for each of the core areas in my business, which included planning and goal setting, leadership, and community building, besides that bookkeeping and accounting area. I expanded another area which had to do with how the brain worked, and it also broke down to the similar type of a structure, where you had the core broke down into subjects, broke down into books about the subjects. What Vanessa's encountering is quite different. She had her first book in her core area. She grabbed a hold of the future books in her reading plan, and she found that a book was about a single subject, a book a subject, a book a subject, pretty much one book, one subject area. She was even surprised to find that why a second book fit the same subject area, and she asked the question, is it okay if 2 books share the same subject area? And the answer is yes. In fact, in my system, 2 or 3 books usually defined a subject area for me. It was very, very common in my system. So hers is going to be very grassy, and mine's going to be more bushy. So then when she looks at this, she also wondered if a foundation card could change later on. If she found the card was too specific, could it become more general? If she found out that it was too general, could it become more specific? The answer is absolutely yes. Here's your foundation card that you found out was too specific. You wouldn't actually change that card. You'd make a new foundation card that was more general, that included this one that was more specific. In fact, this one might be a core card. If it goes all the way back, then she asks, well, what if it wasn't specific enough? If you've got a subject card, it's too general, it's not specific enough. You simply break it down into smaller segments that are at the level of specificity that you need. So the answer is Yes and no. Your original cards stay, they don't go anywhere. Instead, you make new cards, either at a more general level, if that's what you need, or at a more specific level, if that's what you need. Now, Vanessa found that she actually had that happening. It turns out that she had several subject cards that were actually about Victorian life. Victorian life on the stage, Victorian life in general. I don't recall what the third one was, but they were all different aspects of Victorian life. That kind of sounds that she might need a core card on Victorian life that would be over these three cards that were also on different aspects of Victorian life. Now, one of the challenges that Vanessa ran into in researching the period of the 1890s in the Midwest and the Kansas area, in the horrible ecological disaster there, there's very few books, and they're very rare, and it's very hard for her to get her hands even on any information about what it was actually like to live through that time period in that region of the country. And so she has had to go to multiple sources. Many times they would just be articles and other bits and pieces that she had to stitch together. Is that okay? Absolutely, that's okay. We've been talking about books because book has just been a stand-in for whatever the source was. If your source is a newspaper article, that's a fine source. If your source is a video, that's a fine source. Whatever source it is, maybe it's a journal article. That's a fine source too. It doesn't really matter what type of source you have. The same rules apply to any type of source. We always just say book just to speak generally, but it applies to any kind of source material that you might use. And one other case that Vanessa ran into, she had found two cards that were quite similar, but one was more general than the other. Well, we don't have any card numbers on them yet, so what we probably will want to do is take the more general card and promote it to more of a core area and have it point to the more specific card. So as you may suspect, these foundation cards are going to give the basic structure to the Zettelkasten. It's primarily a geographical thing. It's going to give us a way to keep like material in the same geographical section of the Zettelkasten without getting all formal and going into categories per se. It's a way of giving you clusters more than categories, something that has the property of being emergent in that it comes out of your work, and something that you know is relative to your plan because you composed it out of the books that you saw ahead of you in your reading plan. So you absolutely applied to you and your life and what you plan to do. And that solves a real big problem that people come into with categories. One of my commentators was talking about by the time he got down to his subject matter, he was already in the fourth digit of a four-digit category. Well, does that mean that you're going to end up with 4321 as the starting of every card in your Zettelkasten because that's the only area you're studying? That kind of seems a waste. So it avoids all of that stuff. It avoids all the problem of, gee, having a card, what category does it go to? None of that has to happen. And yet you can still get all of the advantages of having categories. So that's what I'm hoping to take my minimalist people through and to, but without getting too deep into philosophy and choices and options and all of the things that make Zettelkasten seem hard when it really isn't hard at all. Once you get rolling with the Zettelkasten, it's the same simple operations occurring over and over. You get used to how your system works, and you just get in the flow, because the whole point of this effortless numbering system and the emerging topics, all of this stuff, the goal is that you don't have to think about the structure. You don't have to think about card numbering. All of that just happens, just comfortably happens, and you get to spend all of your time thinking about your subject matter and what you want to do with it and what you want to learn from it. And if there isn't any other reason for listening to Vanessa's recording, there's a reason right there. Listen for virtually all of the time she's talking. Her head is in the space of her research. And that's what I want for you. That's precisely what I want for you with your Zettelkasten. The numbering should just be automatic. You shouldn't even think about it. It shouldn't even begin to intrude on what you're thinking about. And that is where we're going to go. Okay, so that's it for today. And be sure to check out her videos, and you might want to look at some of the others in her series. She just does a wonderful job of recording her thought processes. And when you compare the thought processes that I share with you and the ones that she's going through, you can get an idea of the broad range of valid functionings of a Zettelkasten. And hopefully that will set your mind at rest to say, well, she's different from her and I'm different from them. Oh, I guess that's not a problem. And that would not be a bad thing at all. Okay, so I'll stop talking now, check out her video, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.